There will come a stage in life when the empath feels as if the universe has drained all sound from the world. No more messages, no more people who once needed you, no more emotional conversations that once made you feel meaningful. Only a long, heavy silence remains, strange, suffocating, and at times almost unbearable. You begin to wonder, what did I do wrong? Why does everyone leave when all I ever wanted was to love and help? You replay every memory, searching for answers, but none are clear enough. All that's left is the emptiness, as if life itself has turned its back on you. But the truth is, the universe has not abandoned you. It is refining you. For souls that feel deeply, life often creates a vast silence to force them to return to themselves. Because when you live too long in the role of the savior, you start to lose the boundary between compassion and exhaustion. You feel too much, carry too much, and gradually forget what emotions belong to you and what belong to others, until your body and soul start whispering, stop. Isolation is not punishment. It is how the universe pulls you away from old frequencies, the ones where you gave until you were empty, where your worth was tied to being needed. When the world around you goes quiet, it means your soul has been placed into the furnace of awakening. Loneliness at that moment is no longer a sign of loss. It is a test to see if you can stay with yourself without needing anyone to confirm that you are worthy. In that silence, the layers of illusion begin to fall away. You start to see how many of your relationships were built on obligation rather than love. You realize how often you've sacrificed your true needs just to keep the peace for others. And then, within that emptiness, you hear a voice. The noisy world had long made you forget the voice of your soul. It doesn't speak in words, but in sensations. A gentle sadness, a quiet pull, a subtle knowing that you have nothing left to prove. That is the moment transformation begins. Not through intellect, but through truth. You were never created to be a container for others' pain, but to become the light that guides your own path. Carl Jung once said, no one becomes conscious without pain. Isolation is that pain not to destroy you, but to burn away the parts of you that are old, false, and have lived too long for others. It teaches you how to be alone without collapsing, how to love without rescuing, and how to give without losing yourself. And then you understand the universe isn't punishing you. It's simply pulling you out of the world for a while to reforge the very gift you were meant to give it. This is not the end. It is refinement, the sacred stage where the empath stops seeking external validation and begins to discover the light that was within all along. When the empath enters the stage of isolation, the first thing they feel is not peace, but profound disorientation. It's as if everything that once defined them suddenly dissolves. The people they trusted, the places that once fueled them, the roles that once made them feel useful, all vanish into thin air. Silence spreads not only around them, but within them. Sensitive souls are accustomed to living through the emotions of others as if their hearts were antennas picking up every frequency of the world. They feel the sadness, fatigue, and longing of those around them. But because of that, when the universe pulls them out of the crowd, they panic. They lose the chaotic stream of energy that once made them feel alive, and must face the most frightening truth of all. They have never truly known who they are without feeling someone else. Jung called this moment the withdrawal of the soul from the world of phenomena, the first step in the process of individuation, when a person begins to detach from the collective ego to return to their own essence. For the empath, it feels like being pulled away from the very air they used to breathe. They don't understand why they suddenly feel invisible. The people who once came to them for comfort go silent. The connections that once felt deep now feel distant. They feel excluded, forgotten. But that is only the illusion of transformation, for beneath the surface, the universe is not abandoning you. It is cleansing your frequency. Empaths are souls who work with energy. They absorb, transmute, and reflect it. But to do this consciously, they must first be emptied, like a vessel that must be cleansed before holding new water. Isolation is that cleansing process. It removes the people, the stories, and the habits that blurred your inner boundaries. It forces you to face what you once avoided. Silence. In silence, you can no longer hide behind the role of the rescuer. You can no longer seek validation through helping others. You are left only with yourself, raw and honest. That is when you begin to notice the unconscious loops that once ran your life. You remember how many times you tried to heal others just to avoid healing yourself. You see how you tied your self-worth to being needed. And when those roles disappear, an empty space opens up. Not comfortable, but necessary. It is the space of rebirth. The universe isolates you, not to punish you, but to cut away the energies that no longer match your vibration. It separates you so you can learn what empaths rarely do: self-containment. When you stop living through the emotions of others, you begin to hear the voice of your own soul. At first, it's small, fragile, easily confused with fear. But if you stay with it long enough, it grows clearer, stronger, and truer than all the noise outside. That's when you realize isolation is not the absence of connection. It's the purification of it. It removes relationships based on dependency to make space for genuine communion where energy flows in awareness, not in rescue. You understand that empaths are not born to be containers for the world, but compasses of light for themselves and others. And that light only ignites when you are willing to sit in the dark long enough. Isolation is the phase where the universe places you into the furnace of silence, where there's no one left to blame, no one to save, nothing to prove, only you and the emotions you've never fully faced. And when you dare to look into them without running, without sugarcoating, without retelling the story as victim or hero, that's when awakening begins. Because isolation doesn't come to take something away. It comes to return the most precious thing, yourself. Once the first layer of the old world falls away, the empath enters the second stage, what Jung called Negrito, the descent into the soul's darkness. This is the moment when silence is no longer an external condition, but an internal state. You no longer belong to the old world, yet you haven't been fully born into the new one. Like a seed caught between seasons, buried in dark soil, silent but inside, life is quietly transforming. During this stage, many empaths feel lost. With no outer voices defining them, they begin to hear other one's ancient echoes. From the unconscious, they hear the cries of the wounded parts they once ignored, the anger, jealousy, and fear they believed good people aren't supposed to feel because they have long identified as the healer. These emotions terrify them. But this is where refinement truly begins. Jung said, no one becomes whole until they befriend their own darkness. The universe isolates the empath not just to give them rest, but to reunite them with the fragmented part of their soul, the shadow buried beneath empathy and duty. As you sit in silence, uneasy memories surface, moments of abandonment, betrayal, and the false belief that love must equal sacrifice. Each memory is a piece of trapped energy, and the universe is asking you to face it, not for blame, but for reclamation. In the past, you believed your kindness was your light. But that light can become a trap if it's built upon the fear of rejection. The universe doesn't want you to lose compassion. It wants to separate compassion from dependence. Isolation is the sterile environment where you learn to love without proving, to help without attachment, to be present without being the center. And then something miraculous happens. Pain stops being frightening. Instead of escaping it, you observe it. Instead of drowning in emotion, you learn to feel it without being consumed. That is the power of emotional mastery, a power known only to those who have burned in their own fire. When you stop trying to fix everything, you begin to see how everything finds its own balance. When you stop seeking love outside, you realize it never left. It was only buried beneath layers of fear and expectation. On a deeper level, this stage is a dialogue between soul and ego. The ego asks, "Who am I if I have no one left to help?" The soul answers, "You are not a role. You are a being." The ego fears being forgotten. The soul longs to be real, and only when both listen does reconciliation begin. This is the alchemy of solitude, where pain is no longer a wound, but a metal forged in fire. Gradually, loneliness loses its emptiness and becomes sacred. You realize you're learning to live again, not through reaction, but through awareness. You begin to filter energy. What expands your heart, you keep. What contracts it, you release. Your empathy is no longer an endless stream, but a river with banks, gentle yet powerful, knowing when to flow and when to rest. This is the stage where the empath learns what Jung called containment, the ability to hold emotion without losing one's own center. In the old world, you absorbed everything. In the new one, you become a safe space where things can come and go without dissolving you. And when you can stand in that state, still, yet not stagnant, deep yet not drowning, you begin to touch the highest form of compassion, conscious compassion. Loneliness is no longer the enemy, but the teacher. It teaches what no one else can. That peace does not come from being understood by others, but from understanding yourself. It shows that true strength is not in always keeping your heart open, but in knowing when to close the door to protect the light within. The universe separates you not to make you disappear from the world, but to stop you from dissolving into it. Because when you no longer need to be everywhere, your light begins to radiate naturally, effortlessly. That is when the empath's gift, the energy of healing, becomes refined and pure. It no longer comes from fear or need, but from the still free presence of being. After passing through the fire of refinement, the empath enters an entirely different phase, a space where they are no longer who they were, yet not fully who they will be. This is what Jung called albo, the whitening of the soul, when darkness is no longer seen as the enemy, but as the fertile ground from which light grows. Pain has completed its purpose. Now it transforms into wisdom. Wounds are no longer scars of injustice, but symbols of spiritual maturity. The empath begins to understand. Loneliness never came to extinguish them, but to reshape them. Within this prolonged silence, a new energy begins to rise. Light, still quiet yet steady as breath. They no longer react from old habits. They stop trying to save others. Stop seeking validation through gratitude. Stop letting other people's emotions define them. Instead, they live in a state of conscious presence. Every action, every word, even their silence, now emits a different vibration, the energy of someone who has met their own soul. At this stage, the empath discovers a profound truth. Kindness is not something you do, but something you are when you are connected to your soul. Before they gave to prove their worth. Now they give because energy naturally flows through them that way without effort without strain. They help not to feel powerful, but because they understand everyone is fighting their own darkness, and true light never imposes itself. Carl Jung once said, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." That sentence perfectly describes the empath's journey. Darkness was once their hell, but by walking into it instead of running away, that hell transformed into the soil of understanding. They realize that light does not mean avoiding darkness. It means living deeply enough to see that both belong to the same sacred order. Then the empath begins to embody a new quality, the stillness of one who has seen. It is not the silence of exhaustion, but the silence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. They stop explaining, stop arguing, stop trying to make others understand, because they know true understanding cannot be forced. It happens only when each person is ready to look into the mirror. And the empath now is that mirror. Ironically, when they no longer need to be seen, they become the easiest to recognize. Their light doesn't glare or impose. It glows like a candle in the dark, small yet bright enough to guide the lost. Their presence makes others feel safe, yet not bound. They are no longer healers in the old sense, but holders of space. Those who allow others to touch their own truth without judgment. On a deeper level, this is spiritual rebirth. What Jung called Koshio, the sacred union of light and shadow, soul and ego. After sitting with your pain long enough, it ceases to be a prison and becomes a guide. You no longer fear your darkness, nor idealize your light. You see everything in balance. Here your soul returns to its natural wholeness, undivided, unopposed, purely aware. In this stage, the empath begins to experience a new kind of freedom. Not the freedom of escaping the world, but the freedom of no longer being ruled by it. They can stand in a crowd and remain centered. They can listen to someone's pain without being pulled in. They can love without losing themselves. This is the energy of the sovereign empath. The empath who has stepped out of the cycle of saving and being used and into a state of conscious existence within them. Empathy has become wisdom. Sensitivity has become strength. Loneliness has become the doorway home. And from that place they understand the universe never wanted them to be cold or detached. It only wanted them to love with awareness, not with fear. The reborn empath no longer lives to make others happy, but to be true to themselves. And from that authenticity, they unintentionally sow seeds of peace throughout the world. They have learned the lesson most people avoid, that sometimes to become light, you must first be willing to become coal, because light is never granted. It is forged from ash, and only those who have walked through the fire of isolation, loss, and self-confrontation truly understand the power of standing in the light without needing to be seen. When the empath emerges from the journey of darkness and is reborn in silence, the universe does not keep them apart forever. Every spiritual journey has two directions: to go inward for awakening and to return outward to live consciously. But coming back to the world after meeting yourself is its own challenge, because the world remains the same, yet you are not. And this change is not a new costume you can display. It's a new frequency, a new way of being, a kind of presence that quietly reshapes everything around you. When the empath steps out of isolation, they realize one thing first: not all old connections can continue. Some relationships will no longer resonate. Conversations that once excited you now feel hollow. Places that once felt like home now seem foreign. This isn't arrogance or detachment. It's energy shift. And when your frequency changes, what no longer aligns will naturally fall away. That is the spiritual law. What does not share your vibration cannot stay no matter how hard you try to hold on. This stage demands a higher level of letting go, not just releasing other people, but releasing the old versions of yourself. You begin to see clearly that the parts that once defined you, the good listener, the healer, the one who understands everything, are no longer enough. You understand that living authentically isn't about filling a role, but about allowing the soul to change form when it needs to. No longer trying to hold on to the image of a good person, you start learning how to be a real person, and that at times means disappointing others. Carl Jung once said, consciousness cannot be awakened without hurting the ego. When you begin to live truthfully, some people will react strongly because your light exposes the places they are not ready to look at. But instead of shrinking back, you learn to stand still, not to resist, but to witness. The empath no longer uses energy to explain or to prove, but uses silent presence as a mirror. And that is precisely what makes them different. Before you were a lamp trying to shine for those who were lost. Now, you are light itself. You don't have to point anywhere. You simply exist, and everything around you adjusts on its own. True light does not speak much. It spreads quietly through the way you live, through a non-judgmental gaze, through boundaries held with proud gentleness, through the way you listen. Without absorbing another's pain, you no longer save anyone. Yet your stillness helps them remember that they too carry light within. And then you realize something profound. To serve the world is not to sacrifice yourself, but to live in alignment with your highest nature. Each time you choose honesty over pleasing, stillness over arguing, stepping back over reacting, you are practicing compassion at its deepest level. Compassion, not as giving, but as preserving the purity of your soul amid the world's chaos. In this stage, the empath also comes to understand life's natural rhythm, that everything sacred has a cycle. There is a time to open and a time to close, a season to sow and a season to rest. You stop feeling guilty for needing time alone. Stop apologizing for having boundaries. Stop straining to look good in someone else's eyes, because now you understand that goodness is not measured by sacrifice, but by honesty with your own energy. From that place, life begins to change, not because you force it to, but because you have become a still center amid all movement. New relationships arrive not because people need you, but because they resonate with you. New opportunities appear not because you chase them, but because you emit the frequency of authenticity. You begin to attract what is naturally aligned, not by effort, but by presence. This is the gift of re-entering the world, harmony between the inner and the outer. The empath is no longer a mirror reflecting others' pain, but a mirror reflecting their own truth. When they speak, their words land deeply because they come from lived experience. When they are silent, that silence carries weight because it is born of understanding. When they love, that love is no longer a reflex of seeking refuge, but a conscious choice to walk alongside. The universe separated you to teach you the art of return, not as someone afraid of being hurt, but as a soul remade in fire. And when you live from that state, you no longer worry about who understands or not, who stays or leaves. You know that everything that arrives has a reason, and everything that departs is part of a sacred refinement. The empath who returns to the world no longer lives as light against darkness, but as light that understands darkness. They become a bridge between emotion and awareness, between the human and the soul, between the outer world and the depths within. As they walk through life, every action, every glance, every breath becomes a quiet prayer for the world to awaken. Jung said, the ultimate aim of humanity is not perfection, but wholeness. The empath now understands this at the deepest level. They no longer try to erase the dark or embellish the light. They allow every facet of themselves to exist within awareness. When angry, they feel no shame. When sad, they do not flee. When loving, they do not lose themselves. They live like a river, sometimes still, sometimes surging, yet always moving toward the ocean of awareness. This naturalness is what sets them apart in a loud and artificial world. As their energy grows transparent, they begin to attract those on a similar path, souls still finding their way through the dark. But instead of showing the way, they simply open space. They don't force change, don't preach awakening. They just live truthfully, and that truth spreads by itself. In each interaction, they no longer seek to be understood. They listen so others may understand themselves. This is the highest level of compassion. Compassion no longer tied to action, but becoming a foundational energy. An empath once refined knows the world does not need more good people but more awake people. Goodness is not enough if it lacks wisdom. Empathy is no gift if it comes with blindness. They understand that helping others is not always love. Sometimes true love is allowing someone to face their own lesson, even if it means being misunderstood, disliked, or left behind. This understanding makes them steady as a mountain, not because they feel nothing, but because they know how to stand still in a storm. In the modern world where everyone seeks to perform, the mature empath chooses to be hidden, not out of fear, but because they have seen the value of stillness. They do not need proof or praise. They act without seeking credit, give without keeping score, love without demanding return. Everything they do, however small, arises from a frequency of awareness. They know they cannot save the world, but they can keep their own heart clear, and from there send out ripples of influence they have no need to measure. The universe uses such souls to keep the whole in balance. The empath is neither hero nor saint. They are those who have gone deep enough into darkness to understand that light never belongs to any one person. When you truly touch this understanding, you stop wanting to shine on others and begin to live with everything in the light. You no longer divide people into good or bad, awakened or asleep. You see the human essence in all things, both fragile and sacred. From there, old pride dissolves, replaced by a profound humility. The empath learns that to serve does not mean standing above anyone, but standing among everyone in equality and love. They become someone who sees the divine in the smallest things. A simple conversation, a gaze, a late afternoon Sunday. They no longer seek miracles, because they have become one in the way. They live light, deep, and true. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. And whoever sees the darkness within also sees the light." When the empath reaches this point, they no longer fear returning to the world. They know they can stand in the midst of life and still keep their inner stillness. This is the greatest gift the universe asks them to carry. The presence of a soul forged into light. They no longer need to become anyone, because they understand the true gift of the empath is not to feel others, but to awaken themselves so that others may see they can do the same. This is the moment when empathy is no longer a burden but a calling, not a mission assigned but a mission born from awareness. When you know that if even one person truly awakens, the world around them begins to change. And in silence, the empath continues to shine, not to be seen, but to remind the world that light has always been here, waiting for the courage to stop running from one's own darkness